some work has been done on this. One example I could give is there was a rapid damage RDA, rapid damage assessment course and damage and needs assessment training that was offered some time ago. Right, so this is just a start off, but there's a lot more focus that is needed for the building back better. Right, so continuing on with the ODPM's continued focus on preparing for climate-related impacts, and the NDPPMC National Disaster Prevention and Preparedness Multi-Sectoral Committee, which many of us are aware of, some of us are in this room are members of. Right now, this committee was formed, cabinet approved, was formed to actually remove that siloed approach to disaster risk reduction and management, and to have a disaster risk reduction and management streamlined across all sectors at all levels, right? So just to ensure that all the ministries, the agencies, divisions, private sector as well was recently brought on board onto the committee, right? So just to have that sense of a direction going forward, the whole of society approach. And then the establishment of our national multi-hazard early warning system, the MHU's assessment was conducted, right? And there's actually a roadmap and an action plan that is on the way. So we're looking at implementing this national multi-hazard early warning system. Again, this speaks to not only hydromet, but all the other hazards that exist in our local context, right? And also, as many of us may know, the community flood early warning system known as CFUs, right, which ultimately would feed into the MHUs, right? There was significant work that was undertaken with this particular project. Several new stream flow sensors were installed. Right, so this ultimately would assist going forward with hydromet, riverine flooding, providing that early warning to the communities that exist on floodplains, and also providing that data to the Water Resources Agency for potentially utilizing going forward for modeling in terms of hydrology of watersheds. And then also we have the implementation of the public alert notification system, which I spoke to earlier, which would again feed into the MHUs going forward, and also the development of a national risk information platform. And this is actually something that would support MHUs. It's a repository, a central repository where ministries, agencies, divisions could share, upload their data to the information, and this would help to support making risk-informed decisions. And then, last on the list, the expansion of the education and awareness program. And the ODPM has been expanding its public information outreach education aspect, right, in collaboration with other ministries, Ministry of Education, Ministry of Rural Development, and local government, to ensure that the public is well aware and educated of their risks, their hazards, and how to mitigate these risks. Right, so last slide, just to underscore, while we enter into the wetter hurricane season, we should also be mindful of the other hazards that we are exposed to, right? And geological is from the right going left. Environmental, we know about the Tobago oil spill recently. Biological, chemical, we know about COVID-19. Societal, which more or less would result as a cascading effect from a major hazard impact, civil unrest and looting and all these different things. And also technological, we know that we rely heavily on the oil and gas industry, so there's a lot of manufacturing industries on the island of Trinidad. Right, so we should always remain mindful of being prepared for any type of emergencies that could emerge from that particular area. Right, so it was a very short presentation, and I'd like to thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Prasad. At this time, we are going to move straight into the panel discussion. Mr. Kabeja, Mission Manager at the ODPM, to moderate this session.
Good afternoon, everybody. As stated, my name is Peter Kabeja, and I am the Mediation Manager at the ODPM. Can I ask you just the last presentation that was up? Can you just return to the last slide for me? Great. I first of all would like to welcome my two colleagues here to the panel discussion, and welcome you all to the panel discussion phase of this forum, right? First and foremost, to my immediate left, we have Ms. Diana Ryan. Ms. Diana Ryan is employed by the EMA, and she is the Chief Technical Advisor at the GEF Global Environmental Facility for capacity building for the CBIT, so the Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency, the CBIT project. Further on, we have Mr. Navin Prasad. Mr. Navin is a regional coordinator employed with the ODPM. So, panel, I welcome you all. And there's a specific reason why I asked to have Navin's last slide left on the on display, right? Because we sometimes may not realize that there are distinct interactions between climate change and disaster risk reduction, right? And for example, climate change mostly focuses on the environmental aspects, right? Whereas disaster risk reduction takes into consideration not only environmental effects, but technological and social events occurring in a hazard fashion. And what happens is that climate change what can present itself to be an exacerbating factor in this. So the two fields don't exist in isolation, right? There are a lot of synergy that can be achieved by consideration of both as fields with a single objective. So I want to make that point starting out from at the beginning of this panel discussion, right? And some of the talking points I have prepared would speak to it as well as to the panel's understanding of their roles within that concept, right? So I'd like to start off with Diana, right? And Diana, the CBIT project. Will you give us an overview of the project?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I just wanted to, they keep referring to the CBIT project, and that's a shortened version of it. So let me tell you the long version. So the title of the project is Strengthening Trinidad and Tobago's Capacity in Transparency, Climate Change Mitigation. Really is to strengthen the mechanism, the capacity in the stakeholders of Trinidad and us to be able to submit to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, our biennial transparency to the Secretariat under our obligations to them, what the country is doing towards climate change mitigation and adaptation. So the three main outputs of the project are to develop the indicators, the guidelines, and the protocols to be able to track our nationally determined contribution and to report on our adaptation efforts. That's the first output. The second output is to develop a proposal to be able to submit to Cabinet to put the institutional arrangements to collect data, to report on the adaptation actions, and to track our NDCs. And the third component of it is the capacity building, of stakeholders to understand and interpret these indicators and to be able to integrate this into national planning, taking into consideration climate considerations. So that's the main outputs of the project and where we are at in the project. The project is scheduled to end September 30th, 2024. So we have already completed the development of the indicators with stakeholders. I think some of you are here already and would have gone through that process with us. So we've developed the indicators. We have a draft proposal that has also been developed, and we are entering into the final phase, which is the capacity building segment. So you can look forward to that because we will be engaging stakeholders who will be data providers and suppliers to what we call the National Transparency System. So just to give you an idea of that part of the project, what we currently have in place at the EME is a knowledge management system. That's part of the monitoring, reporting, and verification system. The Ttmet project is enhancing that system, and that's why we're now calling it the National Transparency System. So a part of that, other than just submitting the GHG emissions data, you would also be required to submit the mitigation policies and measures that you're putting in place in your organizations and agencies, and also the adaptation actions and the efforts that are being made throughout the agencies. And all that is going to be captured in our National Transparency System. The data is then going to be pulled from this via the EME and then submitted to the UNFCCC Secretariat. Thank you.
Thank you. I am actually particularly glad to hear that the approach will be primarily data-driven, because that's actually key and critical to the success of your project. Continuing with Ttmet, can you describe the approach taken specifically for as it relates to the multi-sectoral approach, and can you give us an overview of the level of preparedness that has been demonstrated so far by the sectors?
Okay, so just to go back a little bit, because we've had the KMS, which is our original system, we've pretty much engaged the sectors of power generation, industry, and transport. These are the focus of our NDCs, and so those are the sectors that have been engaged. But we are moving towards submitting a new NDC in the coming year, at least I hope, yeah. And we will be taking into consideration the other sectors of waste and agriculture, forestry, and other land uses. So throughout the project, so far we've engaged stakeholders in these sectors to help us develop those indicators. So I'm really talking about a multi-sectoral approach, and those are the main prioritized sectors for now. On the adaptation side, again, it's being guided by our National Adaptation Plan, which was recently submitted to the UNFCCC Secretariat. That was actually on May 15th. So we submitted the Trinidad and Tobago's National Adaptation Plan, and the indicators that were developed was based on that plan, and they prioritized sectors, agriculture, water resources, and health. Whilst the plan will speak to infrastructure and finance, because the interlinks and the co-benefits and the synergies, those were the three sectors at this time that were prioritized. And those were the stakeholders that were engaged in the development of the indicators and even in the development of the institutional arrangements. So we engaged stakeholders, and they would, a stakeholder mapping was done and a proposal developed.
Thank you. Now, from a response perspective, can you give us an overview of the impacts you've been seeing, and especially as they relate to climate change?
Very well. Check 1, 2. All right, thanks very much for your question, Peter. So now, while I cannot give a definite answer as to if the impacts that we're experiencing or have been experiencing over the years are directly related to climate change, right? My opinion would be I am seeing increase in the intensity, and the terms I use, intensity and frequency of rainfall events, of storm events. And as I mentioned during my presentation, it is essential that there's an upscaling of response capabilities by the various responder agencies, just to name a few: fire service, police service, even the Ministry of Works and Transport, Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government as well, right? Now, having the required resources to respond to these sudden onset events, and it was mentioned earlier about the West Coast convergence, and that's something that it's quite a nuisance. Those storms actually crop up and form within an hour or so, right? And while Met Service would indicate through their daily brief, there's a 60% probability or 70, just to give an example of the thunderstorm favoring western parts of the area. We're not sure exactly which area those thunderstorms are going to come up with. You can recall last year or year before, maybe San Fernando was impacted significantly by one of those coastal convergence storms, right? Where we had the fire service engaged in swift water rescue and all the different things. So, I know that these type of storms, this weather phenomenon is something that is common, but I am seeing, right, and I'm pretty sure that the data could support as well, that there is an increase in the frequency of these storms and the intensity. And it is essential for the resource agencies and for the multi-hazard early warning system as well, as we advance with that, to have to take in consideration these type of events. Also in terms of tropical waves and low-level troughs and all these different things that come across the Atlantic. In terms of frequency, I'm not sure if the data from Met could support increasing frequency of those events, right? But I can tell you that over the last few years, we know that the South Overpuch River Basin has experienced significant flooding for consecutive years, right? And there is a dire need for that increased capacity, not only to have the community prepared and trained as well. The local government has the community emergency response going, but it's so essential for these communities to come together and be empowered and know about disaster risk reduction and the initiatives that they could take as well, right? And then the ODPM has a number of projects as well. Peter, you could probably speak more to this in terms of the community resilience on building water rescue, having high water rescue vehicles, and having watercraft pre-deployed or pre-positioned in areas that are prone to that type of flooding.
Thank you so much, Mr. You, in your response, you alluded to a multi-tiered in terms of the disaster management units, the community. Will you be able to say, and again, from your interaction at all these levels, has there been a demonstration of an appreciation for climate risk within these tiers, or is it solely focused on disaster response?
Thanks very much for the question again, Peter. So, while I know at the national level there is significant focus on climate change adaptation, at the municipal and the community level, maybe not that much emphasis is given to it, but there should be. So ultimately, going forward, the aim is to actually have these climate considerations integrated into planning for community response plans, emergency response plans, and also municipal response plans, and also the equipment and competencies that would be required going forward as we see climate changing.
Going back to Diana now, Diana, the information that you're collecting right now through your project, do you agree that there is the scope for integrating that data into disaster risk reduction measures?
So right now, we don't have any data. We have the system, right? So we develop the system for it. That is yet to be deployed to stakeholders. But to answer your question, if it can feed into disaster, what we can say is that in developing the indicators, we've actually worked with the ODPM as well, and so that some of the information that they would have from there, I think it was the CFUSE project, they had shared with us, and that was also integrated in the development of the indicators. So even in the agriculture, the water resources and health sectors, the way that the indicator was developed was to take into consideration disaster planning as well. And the idea is once that is deployed to stakeholders and we can start collecting our data, it should be accessible. It will have a public facing interface as well as on the data supplier stakeholder side. And the idea under the capacity building segment of it too is to help stakeholders understand how to use climate vulnerability risk assessments in their planning.
All right, so let me just switch out a little bit, right? Because Navin's unit is primarily focused on response, right? My unit actually is the one that leads the charge to the integration of DRR and climate change adaptation. And I would just like to take the opportunity to sort of delve a little bit into that, into the work of the ODPM as it pertains to managing both sets of risk, right? So the unit that I belong to is the primary driver of policy and legislation. The ODPM is working on both of those, right? We hope very soon to have a national DRRM, disaster risk reduction and management policy, presented to Cabinet for approval. And this would be the primary instrument by which disaster management would be catered for in Trinidad and Tobago. It would speak to all the response mechanisms that Navin's unit would put into place, right? Additionally, and again, why I guess what 2 or 3 questions have been focused on data so far is because our unit, well, the risk exercise that's being undertaken, right, will be primarily data driven. And one of the things that we've experienced is that there's so much siloing between different agencies, right? Yes, there's collaboration, but in many cases, siloing is the death to most of these objectives, right? And agencies who possess data, right, it may not be known to the wider community, and that data might sit and there's no value in the grand scheme of things. So our risk-driven activities, our vulnerability and capacity assessments, our risk assessments, right, our policy planning, our response planning will be primarily data-driven. And this is one of the reasons why I'm actually trying to identify these synergies between agencies so that we will be able to identify where the information lies and how we can assist each other in using this information, right, to ensure that that a synergy is created so that hazard effects are reduced, right, and value is provided to the population of Trinidad and Tobago, right? So having said that, and again, Navin, with the understanding that you are primarily involved with the response mechanism, right? In your planning exercises, would you say that climate risk is a key consideration, or you think there's a gap still there that can be better covered?
Thanks very much again, Peter, for the question. So just to clarify, the exercises that we've had thus far, during my time at the organization, would have more focus on hydromet, right? So I could state that 2020, 2021, 2022, the ODPM would have held a series of hurricane preparedness exercises where, during that time we were actually in the pandemic, so we couldn't have a actual field exercise or functional exercise, so we had to scale down to a tabletop exercise, but it was actually, in terms of the amount of stakeholders, was a wide cross-section of representatives from various ministries, agencies, divisions. We even had the U.S. military liaison officer there with us as well in some of the exercises. But Peter, to go direct to the answer is yes. We have considered that climate risk, because I could say that one of the exercises would have involved a scenario of a Category 3 hurricane impacting the islands, right? And just to underscore that, we have a responsibility as well for the southern sub-region, and that entails the regional response mechanism, which is part of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency's. It's sort of a mutual aid system, where if a particular island state within that organization, right, now there's a list of participating states. If a particular state is impacted to the point where their national resources are overwhelmed, then other countries or other participating states, based on the regional response mechanism, has a responsibility to provide direct support to that state, right? So we have a responsibility for Grenada, Guyana, and Suriname. So just to say that if we are, God forbid, if we are impacted by a Category 3 hurricane, the effects will not be only within country, but within that particular, within the southern sub-region, I'm pretty certain. So we need to consider as well how exactly would we coordinate with the regional emergency management organization to coordinate relief supplies. So relief supplies, so humanitarian aid, and also looking forward to the recovery phase as well.
Alright, so keeping a pin on that humanitarian section, can you again, for the benefit of the audience, walk us through some of the considerations that your unit would consider as it pertains to the humanitarian aspect of response?
Sure, thanks once more. So I did mention earlier engaging the private sector, and oftentimes the ODPM would reach out to the Supermarket Association and other organizations as well, the NGOs such as ADRA, to support in humanitarian operations. The private sector does support, right? But I also mentioned the mobile storage unit. That's something that the World Food Program, right? They provided that unit to us, right? We had a training exercise by, I think it was 2022, right? Where it's actually a team of personnel from different divisions of Defense Force. We also had the police service there as well, and fire service. We actually set up this tent. Now, this tent is actually designed to be deployed in disaster environments to store, house, secure supplies for humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations. So that's just one aspect, but the ODPM also has its national stores, or a national warehouse. And as I mentioned, the southern sub-region, this national warehouse, the inventory in it not only is meant to support the country itself, but also the island, the participating states within the Trinidad and Tobago's area of responsibility as it pertains to the regional response mechanism. And we also had a few humanitarian assistance and disaster relief training programs as well. Some were seminars. These were provided by the United States Southern Command and the Delaware National